Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have a beautiful guest today with us, David Cash. And actually, I struggle with the first part, which is supposed to be actually the easiest one, like presenting your guest. But David does so many things that it's difficult to grasp it into like one or two sentences, basically. His work was featured in Vogue, in MTV, Netflix. He runs Cash Labs, which is an agency focusing on NFTs as well. And he does different tiny little consultations for other companies, including Decentraland, which is one of the first movers in the Metaverse thing. So happy to have you here, David, on board.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Have I missed anything crucial?
No, I mean, always doing a million things, doing a lot of community building, especially in the Web3 space, doing a lot of work. Just started contributing for Vogue Singapore, doing some articles for them about NFTs. And yeah, I'm actually the curator of Decentraland's Metaverse Fashion Week. So been working a lot with Decentraland in the past little while, trying to push forward, push a lot of major brands, especially into the Metaverse. So that's been exciting.
We're going to touch upon this fashion thing as well. And there's Martin. Martin is a co-host of our podcast. So, guys, great to have you here. Okay, so the first question is very brief. Like, what's the whole thing with the NFTs? Like, everybody's talking about it. Some people are trying to also get one. What are your first reflections about the whole revolution that's happening over there?
So I think that, the term NFT for me, I mean, this is my daily life, right? For me, it's not strange at all. Like for most people, it's a buzzword. Like it's not just the technology that it is. Like for me, it's just a technology that I use all the time, on a daily basis, right? And it's just a token. It's anything minted on the blockchain. And I think one of the first things that made NFTs make sense to me was actually fashion. I was in school. I was doing a master's degree in Italy. And I was actually on Clubhouse and I was listening to, I'd already actually minted an NFT. It's funny because I minted an NFT before I fully understood what they were. I minted an NFT in 2019 on Maker's Place because I was doing photography. And Maker's Place reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to tokenize your work and sell it on the blockchain? I'm like, I don't know what the hell that means, but I was on like Getty Images and other sites. And I was okay, I'm happy to like have another source of revenue, but then nobody bought it. So I just never thought of it again. And I was looking back in when I was actually researching NFTs in 2020, 2021, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I have these emails from Maker's Place like a year ago. I totally should have taken them up on this. Like that would have been a great opportunity. But anyway, during this kind of like research period, I was on Clubhouse and I had a conversation with, there were a few people from different fashion houses. There was like somebody doing retail at like Marc Jacobs. There was somebody from like, I forgot, Fendi. There was just like a bunch of people on Clubhouse, just, early days of Clubhouse, people were just exploring it. A lot of people from, great companies were just on there. And they were talking about NFTs as just like a pure utilitarian use case. And they were saying like, well, when you buy a fashion item, right? And I've talked about this a lot, since then, but when you buy a fashion item right now, so if I buy a Prada bag or I buy a Chanel jacket, it's going to come with a card, like a plastic card, certifying that it's real. It's going to come with paperwork certifying that it's real. You're going to get you're going to have to make a membership. You're going to have to give them like your phone number and your email, and you're going to have to make a membership to an online club that you're going to be a part of. So really, what makes that so different than an NFT? What an NFT would do, it would just take all of those really old school elements that are currently very literally physical and cumbersome because you have to keep. I know I have a lot of, I don't know, it's just me. I'm like a fun gay in my late 20s, and I have a lot of friends who are like women in their 50s and 60s. A lot of them divorced, and a lot of them have a lot of Chanel bags. They have literally safes full of paperwork.
Could you make some introductions to
them? Sure, but I know people with over a safe full of just paperwork, and that's so cumbersome. That's so old school. That's so unnecessary. Like NFTs can just solve so many problems in retail, just as a base idea. So just for people who are thinking of NFTs as just a piece of art, like, oh, my kids are buying pictures of monkeys. Like, no, like think of it as just the technology and think of how you can use that technology. Because like, especially for fashion or any kind of business, if you add NFTs, like anywhere where you currently have a certificate, a ticket, a means to entry, like anything, a membership, all of those things that are currently, kind of cumbersome and on like Web2 apps and things crash. And like, I'm a member of Soho House. Like what if the Soho House app crashed? How would I get into the house? How would I prove that I'm a member? I'd have to like show them some email from a while ago. It'd be stressful. If it was an NFT, it would just be in my wallet and I wouldn't have to ever, reference that. Again, I would just have it. I could transfer it into the wallet on my phone and it would be mine. So I don't know. It's just it's
So
a
you're
new way
mentioning
of thinking about things. I think
So
putting
you're
them on the
mentioning
blockchain.
that the sorry, you're
No, go for
mentioning
it.
NFT as a means of proof of ownership of something physical, right? But what we tend to see is whenever NFTs are mentioned, it's usually the narrative is uh, finally a way to own something, like really own something that is digital, right? And in most cases, as far as I've seen so far, the people I've talked to, they think when they think NFT, they think yes, a contract, but then also a piece of a digital asset that's associated with it, and the whole concept is
Well,
about owning this digital asset.
it's tokenizing an intangible, right? It's like adding a certification to something that's intangible, like a membership or like even a ticket to an event. Like who says that you should be led into this event? It's because you paid money. Like even if a traditional ticket, there's fake tickets. People have fake, you know what I mean? So it's it's just a new means of certifying anything or proving anything. It's a means of ownership. It's a superior means of ownership because it's provable. It's not just it's on like even money. Like I printed this piece of paper, so you should give me this thing of value. Like it's just like a different way of thinking about value. It's like proof of ownership. Proof and accountability, and that's the whole thing in crypto, especially, is like the idea of like don't trust, verify. Like that anything within this space, you're not trusting the person who's sending you something. You can verify it, and there's a lot of people who get scammed when they're entering the space. But if you know how to do your due diligence in this space, it's actually a pretty superior means of like transacting, at least from my perspective.
Right. So, but still touching on those, owning digital assets, can you sort of, and going back to like the actual definitions and NFT, uh, uh, could you like explain what that is exactly? And could you explain what a smart contract and the associated metadata is, right? Because in terms of owning virtual objects mostly.
Yeah, so like an NFT is at its like base form is something metadata tokenized on the blockchain. So putting that in plain English, it's just something. So for some people, it's like, can it be an image? Sure. It's the data of an image tokenized on the blockchain. So stored on the blockchain, put in like the plainest English possible, like something stored on the blockchain. And so smart contracts are how NFTs are transacted. So when you mint an NFT, a smart contract is signed, and that NFT is now on the blockchain. And when you sell an NFT, a smart contract is signed, and that NFT gets transferred to somebody else. So smart contracts are really, it's a pretty revolutionary technology. The thing that really separated Ethereum and all these kind of new cryptocurrencies from Bitcoin is the whole idea of dApps, or decentralized apps, and the ability to, create infrastructures on cryptocurrencies. And like some of that was being done on Bitcoin. There was a whole, movement called Counterparty in 2016, 2017, where people like projects like Rare Pepes were creating NFTs like on Bitcoin, on like a layer 2 of Bitcoin. But it wasn't really like, it didn't really gain like major public traction. Now there's some of those items are really valuable and I actually collect them. But, Ethereum, for instance, like Ethereum is really one of the biggest booms of NFTs because you're able to build decentralized apps. So marketplaces could be built on these, spaces and things like, initially when you were creating an NFT, and let's say like, I don't know, if you were creating an NFT on your own in 2017 or 2016 or whenever, you would have to deploy a smart contract yourself. But now with marketplaces, so many of these things that seem very complicated to an initial user are now overly simplified by marketplaces, places like OpenSea or Rarible or Maker's Place, Super Rare, like any of these sites. They've automated all of these processes so that when you buy something or list something, you're just signing smart contracts. And it's interesting because it's like what we've talked about recently in the space is this idea of like CDeFi, or centralized decentralized finance. And I feel like that's what we're seeing a lot of the time right now with these marketplaces, because since this is such a learning curve for people, we've introduced these intermediaries who are allowing people to be able to transact in these ecosystems. So I will say, if you're coming into crypto right now, or if you're coming into NFTs right now, don't be too scared, because you're not going to have to come in completely full force into DeFi, into crypto, like understanding every single element. So much of it is packaged and simplified for you, similar to how every element of technology is packaged for us now. Everything's either an app or like even our computers. Most people don't understand how our computers work, but they've been simplified to a point that we're able to use them. So I think a lot of the wallets, like Coinbase, for instance, like Coinbase recently, they've done a lot of big promos, but they've really are they the best crypto wallet out there? I don't think so. But they've done a great job at simplifying the process to onboard new users so that they can go through the process and learn things. Same with MetaMask, same with OpenSea. That's why these are the players that are really like succeeding right now, because they've made the process of buying and selling really easy from my perspective. So for anybody who wants to start, like I would say right now, the barrier to entry is quite low, at least in terms of like what, like I said, like centralized, decentralized, like outfits are out there kind of trying to help you.
So, but is it really true that all of the metadata is actually stored on the chain, even if we
Most
are
of the
talking about
time.
like complicated
Yeah,
assets, like if
most
it's
of the
like a
time.
3D model of something large, like a house on Mars, right? Is it still stored on chain?
A lot
Or
of
is
the
it
time, not
hosted
right. I'd say a
somewhere?
lot of the time, not right now. I mean, there are solutions right now. There's things like IPFS is a way to store, data on chain. There's, and I believe that's in association with Filecoin. There's something called ARWeave. They're also an amazing on-chain data storage system. And there's a whole bunch of these data storage systems coming up right now. But I will say a lot of projects right now, or at least in the past year or two, have worked within this kind of like, that's why I mentioned it, the C, DeFi, centralized, decentralized mindset, because like if you are to like, we worked on a project together actually, Kasi, I remember when there was an AR filter, and that AR filter wasn't hosted on chain, it was with Snapchat, but it was, part of a promotion and part of the world of the project drop. So it didn't necessarily have to be hosted on chain. In the future, I could see a place where that would be the case. But as we stand right now, I find that a lot of elements of projects within the unlockable content, but that's also something to be mentioned. Because if it's unlockable content, it's still in some way associated to an on-chain transaction because nobody can access it. Like let's say, for instance, that AR filter that we made. If we only made that link accessible or that QR code accessible to people who bought the NFT, we could do that because we could make that unlockable content. So I think also unlockable content is something that's like, really in its major time right now because people are interested in it. People want value. Like unlockable content can be anything, right? Unlockable content can be access to a space. And I think that that's really kind of like the main aspect of NFTs right now until data storage kind of reaches this next level. People have talked about it before, but eventually people are going to be able to put your IDs or your, all of your, any means of identification would kind of like sit safer on chain if you actually had like, if you're somebody with, I'm not going to take it out of the box, but I have it near me. Like if you have a Ledger wallet, and you can store your data on chain, it's quite safe. It's as safe as you make it, right? It's in your hands. I mean, it's probably a bad idea that I have mine like out on my desk, but you can control where your power, sovereignty, money, whatever you'd like lies. And I think that's a really important thing in this space, the idea of data sovereignty and having control over your assets in every way, shape, and form. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
No worries. And to sum up, basically, so you see the NFT as a certificate of ownership, basically, that could replace some of the physical certificates that are there on the market as one of the things. And the other thing that you mentioned, David, that is super important is that to pay attention whether it's an on-chain or off-chain transaction, basically.
Yeah.
Because
also like the one thing I want to mention, sorry, just before we go into, because I do want to go into my whole spiel on and off chain. But I think that data storage is also something that's really important that should just be mentioned because especially for like industries like the film industry, let's say, like the reason that we haven't seen that much in terms of films on chain yet is because we can't store more than I think some solutions can store like a gigabyte on chain, and until we can reach a point where we can store like a terabyte on chain or 500 gigs on chain, like a major motion picture might have a difficulty, putting up their 8K resolution, movie theater version of their movie that they want to sell as an NFT or present as an NFT. It's not really possible yet. But yeah, I would love to jump into the on-off chain conversation if you want. I think that's a good point.
Let's go for it.
Cool.
We don't want our collectors, our collectors to be left with a link that is related to unavailable content. Yes, basically. So
absolutely. So yeah, one thing I really like to talk about, especially as it pertains to fashion and the metaverse right now, is the idea of on versus off-chain assets. So one thing I like to talk about a lot, and this I'd say mainly pertains to, a lot of conversations I've had over the past like 6 months, like ever since I remember exactly when it was, but when Meta announced that they would be doing, they would be creating a metaverse and Facebook would be changing to Meta. Whenever that happened, obviously we had a huge boom in the space of millions of people just Googling, maybe even billions of people Googling, what is the metaverse? just straight up, what is the metaverse? Why is Facebook
Everybody
going to
was
transition
talking
to Meta?
and writing about it. So.
Everybody was, people were either confused or excited or upset. Everybody had some kind of a reaction to it, and everybody was looking into it. So
That's right.
in that time, I think a lot of people started looking into things. We saw, every on-chain metaverse like Decentraland, Sandbox, even like Axie Infinity, like anything to do with the metaverse received a ton of attention. All the tokens went up a ton, but that's regardless. That's just like to give context of like where we're at right now in terms of that. But I think that, as people start exploring the metaverse, as like new people to this space, people who've never experienced NFTs, the metaverse, anything before, once they experience, let's say they go into Meta, and Meta's already announced that they're trying to, they've already partnered with Sandbox. They're considering partnering with, they're considering rolling out NFTs and things like that, but they don't really understand what that means. I'm going to be honest. So, if anybody from Meta is watching this, I'm sorry, but hey, my opinion, completely my opinion. Take it as
they've
well.
got 10,000 people working on it.
I mean, hey,
be careful. You're
fine. I'm happy to say this.
They're gonna dislike you.
It's okay.
10,000 people is a lot.
It's fine. But from my perspective, I think what Facebook is doing is they're presenting a version of the metaverse where people are going to interact. I wrote an article about this, and I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. I'm completely for them doing this, because I think a lot of people are going to come into the metaverse. They're going to make interactions. They're going to buy something, but they're going to buy something off chain. They're going to buy something, within this kind of like video game world, like what people are doing right now, like what kids can do on like Call of Duty or whatever. They're going to buy like a jacket or, a ring or a piece of art for their house, or they're going to buy a house or whatever. They're going to buy some kind of an asset with real money, but it's going to be virtual. And they're not going to own it, actually. It's just going to be, Meta's, but they've purchased it, so they have access to it, right? And then they're going to buy an NFT, and they're going to own it, and they're going to go through that whole transactionary period, and they're going to, be like, oh shit, I have to make sorry, I don't think I can say that. They're going to say, oh shoot, I have to make a wallet, I have to do this, I have to do that. Like, what is all of this? They're going to figure all of that out, and then they're going to go through that process, and they're going to own something, and they're going to be like, wait a second, what's the difference between this and that other asset that I bought? And that realization, I think, will make a lot of people kind of go through the, kind of start realizing why NFTs are a better way of storing assets, especially digital assets. Because otherwise, what proof do you have that you own it? If Meta, if some of their servers went down tomorrow, you could lose your assets, and it would be up to them to return them to you. And I can tell you, again, no offense to Facebook, they're just a huge company. Like I've had issues, before with my Instagram account or my Facebook account. It takes weeks or months sometimes to get things sorted. And let's say you bought a property in the metaverse and you spent, let's say, like, I don't know, $100,000 on a property in the metaverse. And if a server went down and it just went away, you'd be pretty upset, right? Like, justifiably so. Versus if it was an on-chain asset, even if a server went down or something, you would still own it, so that when the server went back up, you would have a guaranteed access. You would have guaranteed access to it. You'd be like, I still own the asset. Can I put it back? You'd have it. It would be yours. So okay. I think it's quite interesting.
Do you think is there a chance like they go on chain?
I mean, they're going to have to be at least partially on chain, because they're going to offer NFTs, and Sandbox is integrating with them, right? So the fact that Sandbox is integrating with them and Sandbox is on chain means that they're going to have to at least be like I said, C DeFi. Maybe they are going to have to at least have some kind of a DeFi integration. And they said they also want to roll out NFTs too. So I really think that, what happened when they announced the metaverse, from my perspective, again, I'm not going to, speak for other people, but when they announced the company Meta, I don't think they really considered bringing it on chain or, creating NFTs or any of this. I think that they really just considered they kind of already had a monopoly over the Web2 internet, and they saw, the space eventually moving into Web3. And they're like, okay, well, we want to continue our, superiority, our stance in the space. And that can be looked at as overarching or overbearing. But honestly, I think it just makes sense, from their standpoint as a company. They were already the leaders in social media. So why should they not continue to be the leaders of social media in new tech from their perspective? But from the NFT market perspective, they kind of see them as this like big brother overarching, power that wants to, take over the space. And I think that, it's worth seeing it from both perspectives, because I don't think it's malicious. I just do think that the vision of having one company owning the entire metaverse is not cohesive with a Web3 mindset. And what I'm really pushing for, and Decentraland and all the other metaverses are pushing for, is an open metaverse where we can all interact with other metaverses and people can move between them and, various spaces. And I think that's I think it's a better vision of the future from my perspective than one company kind of owning it all, which is a little bit scary.
And this is what a metaverse is supposed to be. Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, like a metaverse consisting of I call them sub-metaverses. I know people don't do it, but
no. I mean, Krista and I call them verses when we're talking about them, because you have to find some way to talk.
So
but yeah, sub-verses, totally, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, subversives maybe something like this. And what I was surprised actually about when watching the speech by Mark was that they actually, okay, I'm gonna make it open. It's not going to be closed. And I said, like, wait a second, like the way you were doing businesses so far means that it's gonna be closed. Like,
Right.
so I'm
If they follow their
waiting.
same model, which they so far
Yeah,
have.
I'm
Yeah.
waiting. I'm waiting whether he's gonna keep his promise to keep it open.
Because
And maybe
open
you're
is a really big statement, right? Like, is he actually going to
yeah,
make elements of it open source? Like, actually, is he going to put his code on GitHub? I don't think so. I don't think so, right? Like, so many projects in the space do that, and they fully dox themselves. Like they fully
yeah.
just reveal. Like for anybody who doesn't know what dox means, like they fully
Maybe he's
reveal
gonna
their
say
insights.
like
But
it's
like,
open because everybody can enter, and that's it. That's what he meant.
right. But like compare that to like Uniswap. Like Uniswap was so open that they put their entire code and their entire company on GitHub, and there were literally multiple forks of it. There were multiple companies that took business from them and did the same thing on other chains or in other protocols. So like what Facebook is doing, they can say that they want to be decentralized, but until they actually start doing some of those, kind of wild Web3 things like giving information away for free, crazy. It's going to be difficult for them to compete, within the, with something like Decentraland. People who are already interacting in the metaverse. Even something like VR chat. VR chat is, it's not on chain, but it's very decentralized in its nature, and then they don't really think about ownership. It's more just for fun. It's kind of interesting how there's all kinds of ranges of kind of use cases within these metaverse spaces. Even Spatial's another great metaverse, but they're not on chain, but they support NFT projects and they support linking to NFT projects. So that's another example of a project that's supporting an open metaverse. Even though they're not on chain, they're still supporting on-chain assets. So if Facebook even started doing that on a wider scale, that would also be great.
Mhm. Yeah, but
So
Mark,
I just wanted
yeah.
to
Please go ahead, Martin.
yeah, I'm wondering whether we're like conflating openness plus and decentralization, right? So you've mentioned Facebook will most likely not become open source and release all of its code and so on, but they can still view. I mean, they can still be called a Web 3.0 company if they decide to.
They can be like
Well, go
Web3
on chain, right?
compatible. I think they can be Web3 compatible. You know what I mean? Like they can work with and facilitate if they can facilitate and work with Web3 transactions, they will not be frowned upon. I think from my perspective in the space, I think that, at least like I already see them as, somebody who's driving the space forwards because like I said, major attention into metaverses in the space, which is currently mostly on chain, right? So that's great for the space. But yeah, at the same time, I think that, they're going to have to, at least in some way interact. If they want to be part of this greater, like I said, open metaverse, they have to at least find ways to interact and, join
Yeah.
the other spaces that currently exist.
Mm-hmm. Because in the open metaverse, basically it means that you can transfer your asset, transfer your goods from one space to another. So
Interoperably. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So the question is like, when it starts, maybe people will not realize that, okay, it's closed, so I'm not going to be able to transfer, or it's open, I'm going to be able to transfer. But there will be a point where people will be cautious of this. So before the purchase, they're going to be aware. And I think the open has much more value. Yes.
I mean, I think so
In this
because
sense.
if like even companies that kind of believe in things like I've had conversations about this in the past. There's companies right now that are off chain, but if they're companies with a with a long term vision and companies that are working in the Web3 space, like a company like DressX, for instance, we're talking a lot about virtual fashion right now, at least in my sphere. A company like DressX, they are a lot of their assets are NFTs. A lot of their assets are also completely off chain. They're just digital assets like AR filters, etc. But because of that company, because of their mindset, I know that if they had the option, down the road to port all of their assets on chain, like if somebody gave them that option and it was easy enough for them, they would, because they're already making NFTs. They already have this decentralized mindset. I think it's really important for companies, to be open to that. And, like I said, a lot of it is just facilitation because in storage, unfortunately, it does come down to storage a lot of times. Because like what assets can you store on chain and how easily can they be accessed? If I like we've discussed it in the past, but if I can access it via my smartphone versus I have to go on a wallet and I have to do, we have to facilitate some of those transactions, especially within the Web3 space, and that's still to come. But yeah, I think in the meantime, I think it's just worth kind of learning for people watching this. I think it's worth learning some of the mechanisms, like getting a wallet and understanding how to, swap cryptocurrencies and, bridge from one chain to the other, so that when this open metaverse comes, you're ready for it and you're able to interact within it. Because I will tell you, your first time, let's say, bridging from one chain to another, it probably won't be the most easy experience. You probably have to watch a YouTube video or try once or twice or something. So I think it's, it's interesting to say, and that's why I think it all kind of goes hand in hand, because engaging in DeFi and engaging in, acts of decentralized finance, and that could be anything from swapping tokens to, buying an NFT to, like I said, going between one or another chain. These are all, DeFi mechanisms that have been created. They're all decentralized apps that have been created to do these things by people in the community. So, it really kind of the whole space relies on the community to be able to move forwards. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about it. But hopefully I didn't get off on too much of a tangent there, but hopefully I answered your question in the process.
You did. And I was pretty amazed by actually DressX and how they made use of Unreal Engine. Great
Totally.
job, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really cool because right now, where we stand in terms of 3D, right, we can't necessarily port the level of 3D that can be created cannot yet be hosted in on-chain metaverses or on-chain. Unfortunately, sometimes, maybe an image, but, not in its full, glory yet. But when that happens, that'll be huge. And I love that the creativity is already kind of outperforming the technology. I think that's
So
a really good sign, I think.
Yeah. So do you know about anyone that's close to, cracking that problem of storing, larger files on chain?
Yeah, there is one. I'm trying to remember the name. It's like an art gallery space. Shoyu is what it's called. SHOYU. And it's by AOI, Art on the Internet. He's an NFT collector, and he has a foundation where they're trying to make a bunch of different projects. But the only problem with it, and like this, it makes sense when you think about it from a technical standpoint. Only one person can view the space at a time. So like multiple people can view it, but they have an independent viewing experience. Because it's very difficult to render art at a very high level, a space at a very high level, and a whole bunch of other users at the same time. We're not really at that place yet where we could do that on our laptop or on our computer, even if it's a video editing computer, from my perspective, I think. So if you go on the site, shoyu.com, I don't know if it's still up, but at least a few months ago, I think Krista Kim showed it to me, and there was like an amazing exhibit up, and you could walk around just kind of as an individual character and see some of the 3D assets, and it was incredible quality. And yeah, I can definitely see that being the future. Like eventually, I think spaces will be able to look like that online. But for now, I think Decentraland is probably one of the best use cases that we have right now, because you can actually have a ton of people. And even though the polygon count is quite low, there's a ton of assets that can still be hosted in like in a space and still be able to be seen by thousands of people, which I think is really something to be said, because that kind of intersection of those three elements, right? Rendering the space around you, rendering any like objects or artworks in the space, and then rendering not just your character but other characters. The more characters in the space, the more difficult it is to render all of them. Because, for instance, I think spatial, I think they may be upgrading it soon, but for the longest time, spatial, for instance, you can only have 30 people in a space, right? And I know others like are limited at 60 or 50 or 200. Like everyone has a limit, but those are all kind of like specifications that are kind of pain points as we kind of move forwards in the space.
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned actually Decentraland and the technological issues, because I know that you are taking part in organizing Fashion Week in Decentraland. So what are the struggles?
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun.
And what are the wins? What are the wins and what are the struggles?
Definitely a lot of wins. Always a couple struggles when you're working with a decentralized network. I think one of the beautiful things is that we can be all over the world, but obviously that requires working with a lot of different time zones. So I've woken up really early. I do calls quite late. We work on pretty much every time zone right now with this festival. Coordinating with almost 100 brands from around the world. It's been really amazing, coordinating with everybody, but at the same time, every time you work with that many people, you notice opportunities to kind of like streamline processes. And like, at this point, I think that's also helped me and, my team as well. We're able to, summarize things really well and get people information really in a really robust way. So that's really good. And then on the win side, I mean, it's really exciting. I think we're seeing a lot of really big brands finally entering the Web3 space, or being open to entering the Web3 space. Like I said, a lot of people got turned on to the idea of the metaverse very recently, and they don't know what it means, but they want in. And we had a ton of brands, reach out to us and want to participate, and brands that I would never have expected to be involved. I don't know how much I can talk about everything yet, but Dolce & Gabbana was confirmed for a while. Hugo Boss was confirmed for a while. There are a lot of amazing, like top tier brands that are going to be presenting virtual fashion in the metaverse. Many of them for the first time, some of them for, let's say, the second or third time. But I think it's still very exciting, and it's going to be a really historic event. I'm really excited about the state of virtual fashion right now. One of the things I talk about when I talk about on-chain assets is how, like I mentioned, a lot of people's first interaction with an NFT, sometimes it'll be an asset like a house or something, but a lot of the time it'll just be a piece of virtual fashion because they can buy it for $50, $100, $300, whatever, in cryptocurrency, and that'll be their first NFT, a piece of virtual fashion, because they go to a metaverse like Decentraland, they look around, they see everybody dressed incredibly, and they get jealous. They have this FOMO. They have this experience of, I want that. And so they go buy it, right? Because it's not that expensive. And that'll be a lot of people's first NFT, I think. And I hope that, in Decentraland Fashion Week, that process happens for a lot of people. I'm really hopeful for that, because I think it could be a really beautiful onboarding. Because, with some of these brands, like with Dolce & Gabbana and their audience, let's say, being able to come and participate with them in a virtual way, but directly. I like to say tangibly, because, it's not physical, but it's tangible, right? Because you're there in the space and you're interacting with it directly. I think that's a really important experience for consumers of some of these really big luxury brands. And it's something that people want more of, especially in this pandemic period, and especially in the time of war, when people are, staying inside, kind of nervous, they don't really want to travel, especially in Europe. I think this is a great time for us to be able to go and escape in a place like the metaverse and have amazing programming and, activities for us to go and, participate in. And I think that's really needed right now in the world, something online and something accessible like Decentraland, something that you can access from your computer, that we can all go out and, kind of have a moment of escape, because I think we all need it right now. It's a very difficult time.
So can you explain what the experience will be like for a guest?
Yeah, for sure. So Decentraland, as it stands right now, is most easily accessible from a computer. So if you have a laptop, if you have a desktop computer, the good news is you can access it, and it's totally free. You just have to make an account on Decentraland.org. And you can create your own avatar. There's a bunch of stock wearables and things that you can put on just to see what your avatar looks like. Try to make it look like you or not, whatever you want to be in the metaverse.
And then get FOMO, then get
Exactly.
a session with a psychologist, and then purchase something.
Pretty much. I mean, then you'd enter the space. What I like to talk about a lot when I'm talking about Decentraland is, and this is something I recommend to anybody who's listening, is to just, and again, this is totally free, is to just go through their Genesis Plaza. When you load your character in Decentraland, you'll load at this area. There's some links to different spaces on leaderboard type things, and then there's a little waterfall going down. So literally jump down the rabbit hole, go down the waterfall, and it'll bring you into what's called the Genesis Plaza. And literally all of this is a bunch of buildings. There's a little opening place with a bunch of little robots, which each talk to you. You can click on them and it'll give you little bits of text, and they'll talk to you, and they'll tell you about Decentraland. They'll tell you about the metaverse. So for anybody who is new to the metaverse, I highly recommend, before Fashion Week happens, especially if it's your first time coming in, I highly recommend you just pop down, check out this little experience, go through some of these buildings. And the way that what I think helps for people is going through this experience and kind of realizing that each of these buildings is kind of like a website. And each of these experiences where you go through and you look at objects and you talk to robots is kind of like, these are like the different pages on the website. It's a website experience. It's just made more interactive in this 3D immersive environment. So this is like kind of a next stage of the internet, when you're thinking about it that way, which is really amazing. And then that kind of lets you wrap your head around when we go to Fashion Week and you go to some of these spaces. We're going to have, one of the lovely things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be presenting fashion in every way that we can possibly imagine, whether realistic or not. So some of the places you're going to go to, are you're going to be able to see fashion shows that are going to loop in the form of a fashion show with mannequins on a runway. And then you're going to be able to go to stores, and you're going to be able to interact with clothes, and you're going to be able to buy them, kind of similar to e-commerce, but we're really, pushing for meta commerce is what I'm at least calling it. And, we have brands like Boson Protocol who are creating amazing, integrations that allow people to pay with ETH or Mana, or I believe they also have a USD coin integration. Really pushing, e-commerce forwards in the metaverse too. And then there's also going to be MySpace Cash Labs is going to have an art gallery, kind of existing at the intersection of art and fashion. We're going to be presenting a bunch of fashion as art. We're going to have art on the walls, featuring fashion or featuring makeup, beauty, the whole kind of realm. And we're also going to be having a film festival actually within that space, which we're currently in talks with Show Studio about presenting in tandem, who are the leaders in fashion film. And we're going to have an amazing, selection of fashion films as well, because I really want to
So
present
it sounds
fashion in
like
all of its levels.
yeah, it sounds like a huge event. Not only
It's going to be
Fashion Week,
massive.
yes,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's of the stuff.
So we're going to
I
have,
know it's free.
yeah.
Yeah, I know it's free, but let's say I want to purchase something. How do I go about it?
Yeah, so anybody will be able to. The nice thing about Fashion Week, so two things I want to mention. First of all, the Metaverse group, this investment group, created an area that they're calling like the Fashion District. And this area is being activated by a whole bunch of different brands. The Decentraland Foundation themselves, UNXD, the people who presented the, Dolce & Gabbana originally as NFTs, Boson Protocol, again, this amazing, program that's creating meta commerce. They have an area, a shopping street. Rarible has a shopping street, and I have my gallery. And then there's one other fashion show area by Collective, which is another amazing virtual fashion facilitator. So all of these areas you're going to be able to go and witness, and in all the shopping areas you're going to be able to go buy. So if you want to have ETH in your MetaMask, or if you want to have Mana in your MetaMask, Decentraland's token, if you have any amount of any of these things, some people will have giveaways too. If you come early on certain days and all this will be announced, you'll be able to just go to certain places and just claim free virtual wearables. You may have to pay a little bit of gas, but that's it. But it's good to have a little bit of funds in your wallet if you want to go purchase. And yeah, because of what Boson's doing, many of the kiosks you'll be able to buy directly with ETH in Decentraland. I know that sounds pretty basic now in the NFT space, but that's a really new integration, and that's something that's really exciting. At least from my perspective, that's much easier for me, for instance.
So when saying huge, how important is the multi-user experience aspect of it?
I think that this would not be possible without that, because we're going to be doing things like massive runway shows or like a concert with a celebrity. And we experienced this in Metaverse Music Week, which was happening in the fall last year in Decentraland. But the ability to have like 8,000 people listening to somebody live in the metaverse was previously not possible. And I think that's only made possible because Decentraland, I'm not a complete expert in this, but what Decentraland does is they break users into things called realms so that everybody can experience the same content at the same time. But it'll load X amount of people at a time. So let's say if there's 8,000 users, they might have 8 or 16 realms to load all the users at the same time. But what that allows for is for, like I said, 5,000, 10,000 users potentially experiencing the same engagement at the same time, which is really awesome.
So the cap for a single realm or one instance of the
I'm not sure
show
exactly
is
off
not,
the top of my head,
but it's not something around 30 people like Spatial.
much higher. No, it's much higher.
Much higher. Okay.
And also, it's probably worth mentioning, like during Fashion Week, on top of all the things happening within our official programming, a lot of the biggest, districts in Decentraland, like Vegas City, the Arts District, all of these spaces, they're also going to be activating independently and presenting fashion content. And even like we mentioned Spatial a few times, even apps like Spatial are going to be presenting fashion content during this week. And I think that's one of the reasons that Decentraland wanted to call it Metaverse Fashion Week, because we really want to push for this open metaverse and have it be a time where everybody presents virtual fashion across the space.
But no
One
trousers,
problem
right?
Sorry.
Because there are no legs.
There are legs in Decentraland, so definitely trousers in Decentraland. And I don't want to say anything yet, but look out for trousers in Spatial eventually.
Oh, that's a sneak peek. Sorry, Martin, go ahead. I had to go for a joke.
So one potential problem that you guys can see is if it's free and if it's multi-user, it's troll
gone.
territory, right? No, it's troll territory. We've seen that with concerts, right? A lot of people, many of them young people, just trying out what the heck is this thing, and they don't always they don't always behave. So it make it difficult to experience for other users. I know there are
the lovely thing with
kicking.
The lovely thing with on-chain, first of all, Decentraland is moderated enough that they can kick people off, right? But also on top of that, this is on-chain, so we can implement mechanisms where people can only claim one wearable. And if they really want to go through the lumbersome, act of making 20 accounts, I think making an account in Decentraland takes like 5 to 10 minutes. So if they really want to take the time, hours out of their day to make 20 accounts, go for it. Have fun. And they would literally have to make a new wallet. They would have to, it would be so annoying to claim, 5 or 10 wearables, and they would just get tired of it. So I think that, part of DeFi is it making people do it themselves. Kind of, some people are going to do it and they'll try to make bots to do it, and they're going to, go through all these, tactics. But generally speaking, it's not in your favor to cheat the system because it's super lumbersome or annoying. And I think that that's by design. Like, even look at the OpenSea hack. The guy stole I think 24 NFTs or something, but only 24. If it was really a huge hack and it was easy to steal a whole bunch of NFTs, you don't think it would have stole more? It's just because DeFi, it's still a little bit cumbersome, and that's part of its design. It's you trust in code, you have to go through the process of doing these things. So I think that's important to consider.
Yeah, I think what I really meant is not someone actually trying to scheme and crack the system somehow, but actually people just misbehaving. Like, we have people that are in their apartments with no control. They're not really in the public space, right? They feel that they're in their homes, right? And they act differently. And whenever they meet at an event that's free, all hell is let loose. Literally, it's like you have people like burping in your ear, even, right? So that's what I mean. So I know there's
it's the internet. That's the internet.
We're gonna erase it. No worries. No, just but that's true. One of our colleagues went for a Foo Fighters concert from our company, and he said it was horrible because it took him 15 minutes of the concert to find and figure out how to mute others. But I said, you are old. It happens also in real concerts, the same shit.
It's no, I mean, go in any public place with a ton of people and try. I get annoyed immediately. That's why I stay in my apartment. But it's gonna happen in the metaverse too. But yeah, you can mute people. Just turn off your audio.
Well, yeah, you get when you're in the
go in a Call of Duty public, public audio chat. It's anywhere online. I mean, it's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, for a Call of Duty match, it's also smaller, so it's easier to mute people. I don't want to beat it too much on that topic, but I do think this is a general problem, right? If you make an event free and available to everyone, and you're inviting everyone, and you're not in the physical space, so you don't see people frowning upon you. You don't feel this social obligation to behave. It's really, I guess it's something we have to get used to, right? Because we will be judged by our actions also in the metaverse, right? And it can have many consequences, right?
Also, if you get banned from Decentraland, that's on chain. You're never going to come back. You have to make a totally new everything, And especially if you have an existing crypto wallet, you can't use that now in Decentraland. And if you have wearables in there, it'll just kind of ruin. I don't know. I feel it's this is something that's existed. This is just mankind. I don't know if it's part of the conversation necessarily here. It's just that's a reality that will always exist. And they did a really good job of managing it with Music Week. I think that they mass muted people on occasions, or for concerts and things like that. But that's just basic community management. And I think that if a company knows what they're doing, they're fine. I mean, it's that's we've been dealing with the internet since the early 2000s in this case, in terms of community management, AOL servers. I mean, it's a normal problem. I don't think it's in any way, more relevant to the metaverse versus, previously. It's just always going to be a thing. I don't see it going away anytime soon. I think the more accessible we make this, the easier it is for people to do that. And we have to get used to that, or we have to make more protocols in place to ban them. I don't know, but that's not my area of expertise.
Cybersecurity, virtual security that you can go to. Okay, I know we've talked about it a couple of minutes ago, but I was so tempted to ask about those companies joining Fashion Week, because you mentioned that they were very open. Okay, I don't really know what's the thing with the whole metaverse, but I'm in. Yes, but were there any restraints, worries on their side?
I mean, every company had a different situation. Many of them didn't realize that they had to make 3D wearables. They didn't understand that process. They're can you just take our garments and, I don't know, digitize them? And they didn't understand that was a process that needed to be done. I'm not going to name names. Some people were more comfortable presenting their work through film or photography, or, a sculpture versus, a wearable necessarily. There was definitely a pain point in terms of some of the newer brands. Since mana went up, now it's only 100 mana to mint a wearable on Decentraland. But some people don't have $250 per garment if they want to mint 5 garments, for some of these up and coming designers. So, we've created systems to support them as well, with some of the bigger brands, giving some money and helping fundraise for some of these smaller brands so that they can present as well. I think there's been a whole different array. And, I think ultimately the biggest difficulty in anything like this is just coordinating a ton of different people around the world. But that is something that we have the pleasure of doing. And I'm very happy to be a part of the team, in that effort. And, this is the first one. So I'm sure the next ones will be easier to coordinate. We'll have a system. But for this one, we're really kind of like, we're building in public. We're creating things for the very first time. This is the first time anything of this scale in terms of virtual fashion in the metaverse has ever been done. So the team's working really hard. All of the people involved are working really hard because a lot of them are doing most, if not all of the work for their collections themselves. And I think, as I said, also a lot of big companies now are finally going through. I mean, you don't really have a choice when you're working with somebody like Decentraland. They're going through the full process of basically creating an NFT. They're working with 3D designers. They're potentially working with developers. They're working with the Decentraland team. They're, paying to bring assets on chain. They're doing like the whole rigmarole. And I think that's excellent because that'll lead to them understanding how it works if they want to continue in the space moving forward, which I think is important. Like just getting in that mindset at some point. Because if you don't, it's going to be a rug pull, or it's going to be, a cash grab, or it's going to be, if it's completely misunderstood, a lot of people just come into NFTs thinking like, oh, this is a good way to make money, without thinking about like what you're actually going to do and what you're going to contribute and what you're going to give to the people who are buying your NFT. So yeah, I think that it's good. It's good to bring people through this process, especially with a company as major in the space as Decentraland, because Decentraland is like consistently rated one of the top NFT marketplaces, let alone one of the top metaverses, because they've been selling NFTs for years. I have only good things really to say about Decentraland. Some people may not like that they're kind of like low poly, but like look at Sandbox. I mean, like, or look at CryptoVoxels. Look at the other two biggest metaverse solutions that are on chain right now, like much lower resolution. So I think that Decentraland does a great job. And, the things that they have planned for this year, I can't talk about all of them right now, but they're really huge. And this is not the only big event of its kind that's going to be this year. There's going to be another art week happening this year as well, which I think I'm going to be involved in. And I think, they're discussing as well right now if they're going to do another fashion week this year, because there is so much buzz and so much, initiative around it. But the only thing we have to kind of consider, which is maybe also an interesting consideration to mention, is fashion in the metaverse seasonal? Because obviously now in the traditional fashion space, we have spring, summer, fall, winter. Now we also have a cruise collection. You also have a this collection, a that collection. Like some brands are doing, 8, 10 collections a year. Brands like Zara are even doing a collection every month or every 2 weeks. And in the metaverse, how does that work? And are there any kind of like norms that we want to implement through the kind of power that we have through this fashion week? So it's interesting. And I don't think the decision has been made yet, but it's an interesting thing to bring up. And I think that those types of conversations are the conversations that are being had right now in the space, which is quite cool because it's going to help push the space forwards.
So when we started a conversation about NFTs internally and Nomtek, one thing that immediately came up is NFTs and ethics. Do you think this is worth discussing? Because I do think there are some real controversies around NFTs. Is this something you'd like to touch on today as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, I think that the main one that comes up a lot is obviously NFTs and the environment.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this quite a bit, but I mean, I think one thing people don't really consider when they throw around buzzwords like NFTs are bad for the environment, I think a lot of it's not very researched. I was talking to somebody from Palm actually the other day on a call, and they were talking about some of the research that they're doing for major world organizations. Again, I don't want to give away too many details, but they were saying that for instance, like first of all, there has to be a big distinction made anytime you're talking about NFTs between proof of work and proof of stake, right? Like any proof of stake NFT. Meaning that the work is not being paid for directly; it's coming from a staked pool of crypto. Anything that's processed through proof of stake is not bad for the environment. I think that point blank simple. But I'm also going to argue that no NFT transactions are actually bad for the environment. But I'll get to that in a second. But proof of stake, there's no argument. You can't really find an argument that proof of stake transactions are bad for the environment because they're not. I think that the statistic that was given last night, and again, I'll give it out of context, but I think that approximately one transaction on a proof of stake network, such as Palm or Matic or Solana, is the equivalent of sending 3 emails. And I'm sure that we all send more than 3 emails every day. So it's inconsequential. And then when you actually look at proof of work transactions, which is usually the typical, these are usually the stats that are brought up, like Bitcoin transactions, Ethereum transactions. Yeah, Bitcoin transactions, Ethereum transactions. When you actually compare them to transactions of similar amounts from traditional financial institutions, it's almost impossible to compare in terms of in terms of environmental damage, because all crypto transactions are direct peer-to-peer with no intermediary or company involved. Every financial transaction made internationally has a financial institution behind it, if not multiple financial institutions behind it. If you have to do an international transaction, you may be interacting with your bank, their bank, PayPal, Swift, maybe even IBAN, like multiple companies. And each one of those companies has to employ people to, work on your transactions and have, those companies run. So when you actually try to equate, and I have no idea what this number would be, when you try to equate all of the buildings that they have running electricity, all the plane rides their executives go on across all of those companies, all of the environmental damage that traditional companies, enact onto this planet, or kind of push onto this planet, it's almost impossible to compare them to a peer-to-peer system where the only environmental damage is the actual cost of electricity from that transaction. It's incomparable. There's no way that you can compare those two things, because one of them is a direct single transaction, and the other is thousands of multinational corporations that run internationally and each employ thousands of individuals who all drive to work, take plane rides, and work in buildings from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. with electricity on and tons of machines. So it's very difficult. Like, anytime that people are saying that, I don't want to interact in crypto because it's bad for the environment, I basically tell them, like, okay, so then you should probably take all of your money out of your bank account and hide it under your pillow, because you don't want to work with a financial institution then, if you don't want any of your financial transactions to ever be bad for the environment. So that's my potentially controversial opinion on that.
So do you have any idea on what's the ratio for the whole NFT world in terms of working via proof of stake and working via proof of work?
A vast majority is actually proof of stake. And I think that's something that's not talked about enough, especially within NFTs. If you look at how many chains are proof of work, it's pretty much just Ethereum and anything minted on Bitcoin, which is nearly impossible to do. Matic, Palm, Tezos, Solana, I can just look at the back of my laptop. I have a million stickers. Any of these major chains that you're hearing about, Wax, the one that Dapper Labs is doing, I'm completely blanking right now, but any of these major chains that are in action right now, apart from Ethereum, are proof of stake. And none of them have, any kind of significant environmental impact. The only reason Ethereum is the most used chain is because it's the most robust, there's the most built on it. And it's just how it stands right now. That's just where we're at right now in history. But Ethereum is planning on switching over to proof of stake as well. That's just taken a lot longer than they initially anticipated. They were supposed to have it done by last year. They're trying to have it done by this year. I'm sure it's going to be done in the next few years. But when you consider that, and you consider like where we're at in history and how short the history of all of this is, Bitcoin was only, popularized in 2009. Ethereum only came out in, 2012, 2014, depending on, which instance of Ethereum launching you want to talk about. But, all of this is still very new. And, it's in its early days. Like, look at the early days of the internet. Like, what's the environmental impact of computers in the early days? Those massive rooms that took up, entire buildings. I'm sure it was crazy. But, until we get to a point where all transactions are efficient, obviously there's going to be some environmental impact, but in comparison to the traditional financial system, I think if every single person switched to just doing crypto transactions tomorrow, I'll say that one more time. If all people switch to doing crypto transactions tomorrow versus like all of the different PayPal, Cash App, different international bank accounts, IBAN, Swift, it would be a much greener way of transacting. And sorry to get on a high horse or initiate with that, but I really feel passionate about that whole conversation. And I think that, I've had a lot of arguments with people in public spheres, around people who are really passionate, saying that, crypto is ruining the environment. And I try to, refute most of their arguments, unfortunately, just because I don't think that they're correct.
So we mentioned some time ago that one important breakthrough that we still need for true decentralization is hosting metadata
Yeah.
on chain. So does that change the picture in any way? Does that, do we have reasons to believe it's going to affect the carbon footprint of NFTs if they're stored on chain?
No, I mean, like, I think it's just making a shift. It's the next shift in technology. Right now, we're storing data on servers, right, in server farms. And that's going to be shifting to storing data on chain, which also requires the only thing that storing data on chain requires is more people in the crypto network because of nodes. And we need more nodes in the chain in order to support a stronger and more robust blockchain. So I think it's really interesting. I think that as the adoption increases, it will inherently become more sustainable because it'll be distributed across more computers and therefore it'll have a larger network. So I think the more you understand blockchain, and like there's been beautiful articles written on the idea of like blockchain as an analogy, like mycelium, like mushrooms, as an analogy for blockchain, because like as the mushroom grows, there's like a symbiotic relationship. It benefits everybody involved. And that's a really smart thing to, not a smart thing. It's a really good thing to start looking into when you're trying to get into crypto, and just understanding that the more you contribute to the ecosystem, the more the ecosystem will grow. And that's what makes the space beautiful, is that you can still, in the space in the time that we're at right now, you can still have a direct contribution. You can still make a direct contribution on the future of the blockchain as we stand right now. So that's why I kind of encourage people to get into it. Maybe that's not where we were trying to go in terms of that answer, but I always like to encourage people to get into it because you can really make a difference in terms of it. Like even with a fairly unsubstantial monetary investment.
Right, and the other aspect of the ethics around NFTs is, I know NFT is just tech, right? And tech can be used in a good way and in a bad way, right? And someone said once that every piece of technology that people will ever come up with will always, the person will always find a means of weaponizing it, actually, right? Even like to that point. But so I know it's, the tech itself is not evil, not good. It's how you use it, but still, we do cringe, at least, or we have some actual ethical doubts about cases where someone minted GPS coordinates, right, or minted something that obviously, instinctively doesn't have any value whatsoever. It's completely void of like any meaning and value. So we were thinking that NFTs are a playground for people to essentially try and convince other people that something that's worthless is actually worth something, right? And he's using the hype around NFTs to sort of inflate that value, and it's purely speculative, and there's no real inherent value, right? Something that we've at least as a society learned to value and cherish, right? So do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's always this like 4chan part of the internet, right? Like that's kind of unavoidable, and I think that's always going to be a reality, right? There's always these people who just love pissing people off. It's their hobby, and they're going to exist, right? So they're going to create NFTs, and they're going to spend their money on stupid memes that they're going to try to sell, and they might sell some of them. I also want to make a distinction between those people and different artistic movements. I think something interesting with NFTs, and you talked about prescribing value. I mean, it's the same as it's just art, right? It's just the next stage in terms of art marketing to a certain extent, right? Like, what is art? What do we prescribe value to? There's a lot of people who are very Dadaist in their mentality, and they think that anything can be art. And I think to the same extent, there's an NFT movement called trash art, which was kind of like forefronted by this guy called Rob Ness. And he's sold NFTs for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But a lot of them are, like pictures of literal trash cans or like glitches or things like that, and he kind of pushed this kind of like Dadaist mentality of like trash art. So I think there's every level of it. Some of it is literally just trash. Some of it is this mechanism that has been created of trash art. Some of it's great. There's blue chip artists that mint NFTs and sell beautiful pieces of art for millions of dollars in this space as well. Look at some of the top performing NFT artists. But I definitely think there always will be a crowd to sift through. There's a lot of spam. I mean, I'm right now hosting an NFT drop with Kenny Schachter, and it's in support of Ukraine. And, people can just send NFTs to our wallet. We've got some trash. We got some garbage, and we've considered hiding some of it. Some of it we keep up and just put up for a low price, but, just because it's a fundraiser. But typically, when I host an NFT drop for a celebrity, let's say, I'll have like 20, 30 people just like spam me, airdrop me NFTs. And a lot of them are trash. I think it's partially up to us to just see that as a reality of the internet. Like we get spam emails, right? Airdrops and that, it's the next stage in that. But at the same time, we should hide those. We hide our spam emails, right? And at the same extent, it's also partially up to the organizations, the CDFI companies like OpenSea or Rarible, or, like our emails, like Gmail, now they filter our spam, when in the 90s and early 2000s, they didn't. To the same extent, now I think OpenSea and Rarible, and as these companies grow, these other companies, as monoliths, Coinbase, and other companies kind of like grow in the NFT space, we're going to see more moderation taking place, which is inevitable, and more automation in terms of flagging content and taking down things like hate speech. And I think that's to come. It's just, again, it's the same as the early days of the internet. We're in these early days where things are not monitored. And consider that sites like 4chan still do exist, and people do have like terrible pages on the dark web still to this day. Even in the Web 2 internet. So it's inevitable that some of that's going to carry over to Web 3, especially because, unfortunately, and I hate even bringing this up, but Bitcoin and a lot of these, a lot of the initial crypto communities, a lot of them were built around things like drugs and crimes and the criminal industry. Not all of it, and not even a majority, I would say, but there still is a portion. So those people are always going to exist, and there's always going to be some kind of element to that. So it's just human nature. There's always going to be a percentage of the population that's unfavorable. So what can you do?
So where we drew the line is because we've been in talks with many companies that want to jump on the ship of Metaverse and NFTs and so on, and we wanted to sift out some of them actually, right, and basically wanted to have rules for actually rejecting business if it doesn't meet some criteria. So where we drew the line is, first of all, we want to know what's in the mind of the founder, let's say, right? So what is his motivation, right? If it's,
I feel like when it's assessing a project, it's really like it's I feel like you're on the same page. Not to interrupt you, but is it a cash grab or not? Because so many of them are. So many of them
as
are
simple as that,
purely
right?
that, yeah.
But also, I think what we want to have is, the question is there an artist involved?
How are they getting paid? Yeah, as well.
Yes.
Like so many projects will bring on an artist, and unfortunately, they'll just pay them a tiny bit when they should really be paying them. What I like to do is pay an artist their rate, whatever they ask, and then also give them a percentage. It doesn't have to be a huge percentage, but just give them a percentage, make sure they're part of the drop.
If I'm not mistaken, we can have them get paid every time the NFT is
right in perpetuity, and that makes them way more invested in the project, makes them work harder, makes them do a better job. It makes them excited about it. You shouldn't have an artist that's sad to be part of the project. That's not ideal.
Yeah. And the last aspect is, does this, that's owning the NFT bring you any joy whatsoever as a collector, right? Because, owning GPS coordinates and just...
I like to say value instead of joy, but it's the same. Like joy is a form of value, right? Like if it makes you happy, that's valuable to you. But I agree with you completely. Like what does it do for you? Like why would you buy it? Either it has to be something you really want to put on your wall, or it has to be something that has some kind of utility or value to you. Like, oh, it'll get me into this club. I can do this. A Bored Ape can get you so many things now. There's literally a dating app just for Bored Apes now. Like a Bored Ape can get you into events. It can get you into online spaces. It can get you into so many things. So just to consider, it's an investment.
So how does NFT real estate relate to this, right? Because
like virtual real estate?
Yeah.
It's valuable because of the same way that real estate is valuable. Like location right now. What's near it? Where is it? Is it in Decentraland? Is it near a really populated area? Okay, it's inherently valuable. 10 years ago, would it have been valuable? No. But is it valuable now? Yes. Same with Sandbox. Same with any of these other spaces. Like, it's the same way. I'm not a real estate agent, but I've helped people buy virtual real estate, and it is, really does come down to where is this space based? How many plots of land can I get there, and what's the cost? And right now, it's pretty high. If you want to buy in on Decentraland and you want a couple plots, it's going to cost you at least 20 grand, 40 grand. So it's an investment now. So if you bought it 2 years ago,
what if the
cheap.
plot is not something you can actually experience? When you can enter like a 3D interface,
you can go there,
walk around the plot and. Okay, what about companies that just sell like information about the parcel, right? That's your parcel. It's here on the map. There's no way of interacting.
Do you want to give me an example? Because I've seen a whole bunch of NFTs be successful, like things like Loot that have like a game world and they're kind of hypothetical. Okay. But like most metaverses, I will say, do either have like it's gonna happen and either it's a new metaverse and you're buying in at the first time and it's at a base price, or like Decentraland, all the plots are bought pretty much and they're at some inflated price because they have value. So like what's your example of maybe a metaverse that's hypothetical. Sorry.
To be honest, I don't want to give you this exact company that I'm thinking about,
Okay.
because I don't want to put anyone in a bad light.
Okay, no worries.
And I do mean a specific party.
Is it who I think it
yeah.
is?
I don't know. We're probably gonna cut this portion out of the call anyway. But
I'm gonna jump in because what I wanted to add upon this is that I think we don't know at this stage where that's gonna take us. Like the investment in the land, how I see it is that there is somewhere an intention to populate those places, to arrange events over there, to place assets over there. I'm not sure if it's already possible at some of the metaverses, basically, but I know there is a plan, there is a roadmap for
pretty much
making
all
it
virtual
more
spaces.
useful.
I think pretty much all virtual spaces you
But
can do things, and like in the metaverse, like in Decentraland, let's say you can have a business in your plot of land. People make money in their plots of land. There's casinos, there's clothing stores, there's art galleries that sell art successfully in various metaverse solutions across the board. So there's a million use cases you can make of it. It's really whatever it's anything you can make in reality. You can basically make in the metaverse now. As long as it would work within a virtual setting.
Yeah, what's in question is actually, are people going to come? Are there going to be enough traction? And how they are going to be
I think yes. I mean, look at anything that people are currently doing online. I think the future of any of those industries is in the metaverse, like virtual, like e-commerce, fashion shopping. That if you can have a more immersive experience of it and see the clothing better, why would you not do that versus like scrolling through photos if you can actually see it in 3D and like try it on? Maybe in AR, maybe in a couple different formats. I think it's just like the easiest use case is anything that people are currently doing online, because the way human nature goes is they will continue to do that experience virtually. So how can we bring those experiences into the metaverse, and how can we improve them by bringing them into the metaverse? So like things like gambling online, people actually really are enjoying what Decentral games are doing, because they're creating casinos that people can bet their cryptocurrency on in the metaverse, in Decentraland and other metaverses. So that's a superior version. They can go with their friends versus going to like an online gambling casino and playing with a bunch of random people from around the world. They prefer it. They can go play with their friends with a virtual host. So there's anything that's currently popular online, I'd say. And there's a lot of industries there, like I think anything that's currently popular online does have a future in the metaverse as it stands right now. At least some future. Which people are saying the metaverse is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and I think that's why. Because, like I said, how big of an industry is the internet and companies that are on the internet? Every company in the world is on the internet. I don't even think there's a number on that. Maybe there is. Maybe I'm ignorant, but you know what I mean. Like the metaverse could be infinite in terms of its potential, because I see it as kind of like the next stage of the internet, because it's just it's a more immersive way to view things virtually. It's a more immersive version of the internet. And you can like spatial is actually a great example, because you can interface with it across various devices. Spatial I can view on my computer, on my iPhone, and on my VR headset. And I own all three of those. So I've switched and seen the same exhibit in 3 different formats because I want to access it in a slightly different way. That's the future of the metaverse, I think.
So one thing I would be afraid about if I were to own virtual real estate is the problem that theoretically the supply can be unlimited, right? So I'm not sure if it's going to hold value. I know for to make it, if I'm Decentraland, to make it valuable, I do want to limit the supply.
It is.
Right?
It is limited.
In some sense,
it's
right?
predefined. Then, it's minted. I mean, that's anything that's an NFT. One of the elements of it, like technically, it should be predefined in terms of how many X's are available, right? Like it has to be predefined in order to create scarcity. Like that's part of one of the main pillars of NFTs.
There's open room for other companies to join in and have them make just maybe they will take the market by storm, and suddenly your plot at Decentraland is not as valuable as it was before, right?
That's possible, but also like if you buy a plot of if you buy a building in Fifth Avenue in New York, in 10 years, that area could not be cool anymore. It's the same type of, it's the same form of an investment. It's a real estate investment. You have to make calculated risk, and you also have to do your research. I'm not going to tell anybody to go buy land in Decentraland. I'm not going to give anybody financial advice. You should do your own research and make your own calculated decision that you think Decentraland is a good 5-10 year play. Because I think that, one of the things that people are doing in this space that I don't necessarily recommend is making really short-term plays within the crypto space, trying to go for a flip and trying to just go from like, okay, I'm going from 0.5 ETH to 1 ETH. I think that, the way that we really grow in this space is by making long-term investments, if you are planning to invest, and trying to consider, if somebody bought it, I bought a little bit of Bitcoin in 2014. That's worth a whole lot more than if I just flipped it, a month or two later. And that's been years, right? If somebody buys a piece of real estate in Decentraland because they believe in Decentraland and they see it having a 5-10 year future, then they're going to be very happy in that investment. Is there a possibility of another person coming? Of course, always, right? Like OpenSea doesn't have a like OpenSea or Rarible, or even like, I don't know, even large. I'm thinking of very regional examples off the top of my head, but like, I don't know, Apple. I mean, like we saw Apple take over Microsoft, we saw Facebook, we saw Instagram take over Facebook, and then Facebook bought Instagram, and then Twitter is now relevant again. Like everything changes. It's the way of the world. But I do think that personally, my own personal opinion is that, the metaverse space, and especially the people at the forefront of the metaverse right at the beginning, are major players in the space and will continue to be major players in the space over the next 5-10 years. Are they going to last forever? I doubt it. Nothing will. But I see these people being very successful over the next period of time, because they're the ones really investing in the metaverse right now, when it's right at its beginning, still. And Decentraland's been around technically for almost 5 years, at least since its infancy. So they're early. They're really early.
Yeah, and last question, because I have to ask it. Like, the virtual thing is there for many, many years. I think we can say it started with Second Life. And people, like the average person, the average user, they actually, it didn't go global. Yes, it didn't go in masses. And I have a feeling that you think it may kick off. And my question is, like, what has changed? What do you think has changed?
I mean, this is what I wrote my master's thesis about, which was like the idea of decentralization.
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah. I didn't know this one.
Yeah,
this wasn't
it's
staged.
like the idea of decentralization, like as a mindset shift in society. I think it came as early as like when people started thinking about, like, I kind of attribute it to like late 90s, early 2000s as well, like the idea of like the virtual nomad, or like the ability to like decentralize yourself, because we very much had this like post-industrial revolution idea of like a workforce and being a part of a workforce, and you go to the office every day and you go home to your wife and kids, and it was kind of this like American dream that was perpetuated around the world, or like this like Eurocentric dream that was perpetuated around the world, like this is the way that life should be. But I think in the 90s and the 2000s, people started shifting away from that and being more open to living life however they wanted to. The idea of, that idea of the virtual nomad or the digital nomad kind of popped up as the internet became more accessible remotely, as we got laptops and phones. That started to come up. And then from there, like you said, we had these kinds of like early virtual worlds. A lot of them were video games, right? Like I attribute a lot of this like World of Warcraft, League of Legends, IMVU, like you said, Our Second Life, like any of these kinds of spaces where people started experiencing life virtually and getting that idea. None of this was on chain, but like I've met so many people who are 3D designers now, and they make NFTs, and their first interaction with the space was creating virtual assets in IMVU or Our Second Life, because it made sense to them really early. So I think it was a big societal shift, and it happened over a period of 20 years. But essentially, it was just people willing to decentralize themselves from their immediate ecosystem. So whether that mean moving somewhere else, starting a business online virtually. Some of the earliest YouTubers and influencers, people thought they were crazy, trying to actually start a business online. The Gary V's, the Shane Dawsons, all these people who've like taken, Jeffree Star, like have entire careers out of, YouTube basically, and social media and decentralization, the fact that they can access a decentralized audience remotely from their computer. And I think that, Web3 and what we're experiencing right now, this is just integrating finance directly into it. I think always the struggle that we've experienced over the past, 10, 20 years is people would be doing all these things and interacting in all these spaces, but it would be for fun. It would be a hobby. It's a video game. There's this mentality. Now it's considered gamification if it's fun. Before it was considered, it's a game. You're not going to make money from it, right? A few people were outliers in that. There were a few people making money. I know in the video game world, there are pro gamers. There are people who make skins for the program. I don't know. There's a very small ecosystem of people who are making money within that previous kind of Web 2 world, but it was fairly elite. And I think that now with Web3 and the ability to directly monetize tons of different interactions, tickets, art, music, experiences, whatever you want, you can directly sell it and tokenize it and sell it on the blockchain in a direct way to your consumer. I think that's why this is changing, and it's kind of just like, from my perspective, the next leg in this perpetuation of decentralization that we're experiencing globally. And we're going to see a lot more of it. Our borders are slowly, coming down. Crypto is a big proponent of it. Crypto has really enabled people to, I love seeing stories right now. I hate what's going on in Ukraine, but I love seeing stories of people who left and their bank accounts are frozen, but they have crypto and they're able to live and they're in a hotel and they're fine and they're thriving. And if everybody was in that circumstance, people would be a lot better off. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but like that's, it's a proof. It's another use case. We've seen this in Turkey. We've seen this in Lebanon. We've seen this in Cuba. We've seen this all over the world. It's another use case showing that when people kind of like invest further in this decentralized ecosystem, it can help them remain decentralized when their immediate, surroundings are no longer working in their favor. So I think it's really powerful. I think that's the future of this space, and we're going to keep seeing that. It's a trend, but it's also like how society is kind of moving in terms of our mindset. Like we obviously evolve over time. So like we've gone from wanting to be the worker to wanting to have sovereignty over ourselves and our lives and our data and our money. So I'll end on that.
Awesome. Thank
Awesome.
you. I do have one question, but we are out of time, so I'm not sure if so. Just if you still have time, just one more thing. If let's say someone listened to us and he feels he's convinced he would like to decentralize himself or just be a part of the whole revolution, let's say, what's the most like straightforward first step? What should I do tomorrow to get a glimpse of the world you basically live in right now and thrive?
I'd say start reading a lot and start watching a lot of lectures and videos. The lovely thing with the decentralized world is that all the information is made available to you completely open source on the internet. Go to the Ethereum Foundation's website, read some of their information. Read the Bitcoin white paper. Like literally look through some of this stuff. It's completely open source. It's all available. I'm not going to tell you what crypto to buy, but look at like I said, look at cryptos that have an ecosystem built on them. Bitcoin and Ethereum are two of those. Solana is potentially another one of them. Like look for cryptocurrencies that have full ecosystems and people's lives fully built on those ecosystems, because there's a reason behind that. And do your own research. That's the biggest proponent of this space. Like I don't want to tell anybody to do anything. Look into all of the things that we've mentioned: Decentraland, crypto voxels, Sandbox, Bitcoin, Ethereum, NFTs in general. Like if you're not familiar with NFTs, go on OpenSea, go on Rarible, like check out some different sites, understand why you would want to buy on one site versus another. Like go into these, I have a ton of content online for free as well. Like if you go to my social media, you go to my link tree, I have like an 80-page paper that's free online. Like there's a lot of information given, around. If you go to OpenSea, they have like an NFT Bible. There's a ton of open source information, and that's part of what this makes this space, scalable. And I highly recommend anybody to just start diving down the rabbit hole. And again, it doesn't start with a monetary investment. From my point of view, it starts with acquiring knowledge. So start from a point of understanding, and then if you want to make an investment because you get it and you like it, I encourage you to do so. But I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having you today here, David.
It was a pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.